Museum. Happy to have you all here. If you've never been here before, if you have a little time after his presentation, you're welcome to look around. We're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays basically from noon to 4. The board is an all-volunteer board, and we don't really receive money from anybody other than we have a membership drive once a year. People kind of donate when they're here a little bit, throw a couple of bucks in the kitty, but it's not necessary. This is always a free series of speakers that we have, generally the last Saturday morning of each month, starting in usually March or April. The museum closes down for January, February, and early March to change out exhibits. In this room, there are 3 that we keep. Marie Oliver, designer of the Missouri State flag. Lewis Houck, who opened up the boot heel with his railroads, and Willard Vandiver, who is responsible for Missouri being tabbed the Show Me State. So, and then, of course, up in the front room is Gerardo. People in Cape know about Larmer, but they know very little about Gerardo, unusual. Our curator, Charlotte Slickard back there, is currently writing a book on Gerardo. And so if you're interested in Gerardo, we're kind of the depository of most of the information on Gerardo, and you can learn a lot about them up there in that front room if you have the time or if it interests you. Okay, today, old Sam Clements, a message in a bottle. You never know what Randy's going to come up with. He speaks here generally once a year on some subject. Most of you know he's a deep sea fisherman and a deep sea diver, and he and Mel Fisher discovered millions of dollars worth of gold down in the Caribbean or wherever. A few years ago, he brought all kinds of gold that he stole, I'm sure, from that. So anyway, I think most of you know Randy Barnhouse, and we're thrilled to have him. And this will be, I guarantee you, this will be an informative but very entertaining presentation. So Randy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jim.
Now I'm going to turn the lights out in Georgia.
That's good. I'll look better. Well, dear friends, family, acquaintances, new friends I don't know, and everyone, thanks for coming and enjoying some time here, I hope, as opposed to enjoying a nice fall morning. I'll see if I can make it worth your while. I'm Randy Barnhouse, and before I forget, I want to acknowledge Dr. Randy Rhodes, who is pushing the button for the PowerPoint. I appreciate him. Professor Rhodes, he's also the Chief Juvenile Officer of the 32nd Judicial District, and he is also a professor for Ole Miss. So he's a very busy fellow, and he's a guy to listen to and follow a lot of the examples he's done for the youth in our area. I was born in Bonne Terre, Missouri, and raised in the Deloge area. And slide professor, I came from humble beginnings, like most of us. That's my chicken Edna I'm carrying around there, and as you can see, it's October of '57. And sis, I think that was taken at the property across from Wetterow there back in the day. Jackson Street. And as I recall, my mom Bernice, she started calling Edna dumplings. And boy, did that ever come true, but Edna got to be around for a while. Up in Park Hills, it's called Park Hills now since they consolidated all the cities up there, the occupation you pretty much did up there, and you were expected to do, and it was kind of your fate, was you became a lead miner. Our uncles worked in the mines, my grandpas, other relatives, and we had one uncle that died in those mines, and maybe another one on the Barnhouse side. I kind of caught a story on that. Our Uncle Homer Patterson died in the mines. Point being, a lot of us, my brothers here, we narrowly escaped being lead miners by about a generation because the mines closed down in 1964. So could have very well been lead miners ourselves. That was what people did up there. And I guess the uncles and the grandpas, their form of treasure was in the form of lead in those old dangerous mines. So once I got out of high school and really didn't have much to do besides get in trouble, I guess I woke up one day and I joined the U.S. Army and joined the military police, and this is at the old nuclear weapons barracks in Landau, Germany, where we secured Nike Herc missiles for the coming Russian invasion. Our missiles were made for taking out squadrons of Soviet bombers as they came across the Fulda Pass area and the tanks and all that. But that was our barracks cat there, and I don't recall his name, but that was a morning after realizing that, well, at least the night before we didn't start Armageddon and everything was good and we were off watch, right? But you're seeing a theme here of me holding on to animals because I have to put in a plug for the Humane Society. They're doing great things out there. If you can donate, volunteer, walk animals or whatever, they'd be glad to have you. Let's see here. After the Army, I moved to Cape Girardeau in 1977 and went to the university to major in the education. And muddled through that, and finally one day they said, "Randy, you got to graduate." You know, I'm like, "Can I take basket weaving? Can I do something?" "No, you got to go." So I got my degree in education. I wasn't quite ready to use that degree, and one day I was working at the bubble pool over at the high school, and gosh, it was like 10 degrees, and I was scraping my windshield off, and I was like, I'm over this cold weather and all that. So by the time I drove home, I formulated a plan. I was like, I'm going to sell my home, I'm going to auction my furniture, I'm going to get a travel trailer, I'm going to cram my dog and 2 cats in that travel trailer, and by golly, I'm going to move to Key West. I've been there a few times, and that's how I ended up down there. So I get down there and I get a job as a lifeguard at a luxury resort. And I had the biggest job. This is the greatest thing. I found a houseboat. I was living on a houseboat, and I was lifeguard at this resort. And nothing could take me away from that until I heard that Mel Fisher was looking for the Atocha, and I wasn't helping. This is still going on because I had heard that Mel found the Atocha already, but silly me, that was in 1980. That's when he discovered the Margarita shipwreck, and I thought it was all over. So I start pounding on Mel's door, and I give him a resume, and he's like, "Well, yeah, kid, whatever." He puts it in a pile of resumes, this high and all that, and there was no job for me as a diver. I'd become a diver like 5 years before that. So I just took it upon myself. I just started showing up for work. And my days off from lifeguard, and I showed up for work, and eventually when the first diver's job came open, I got that job. And like a month later, the crew discovered the Atocha, and it was a 16-year search at the cost of $10 million and the loss of Mel's son and diver Rick Gage and his daughter-in-law, Angel, who died in that tragic North Wind accident. And so we find the Atocha, and so one day I'm up in the laboratory, and we're cataloging thousands of coins and artifacts for investors who are showing up, backing their trucks up or their cars, opening their trunks, and we're just piling in silver bars and thousands of coins and emeralds and artifacts that they got as part of their division. And so we're cataloging these things because we did everything. I mean, all of our boats were at the dock because the weather was so crappy, but Mel had something for it to do, whether it was welding or doing whatever, because we did everything all the time. So we catalog these coins, and the phone rings. I pick it up. It's Taffy Fisher, Mel's daughter. "Yeah, Taffy. Randy, Dad won't sit still for this photograph for Life magazine. Do you think you can come down and do it?" And I'm like, "Let me think about it. Sure, I'll do that." And 8 hours later, Hambone's hands end up on the cover of Life magazine. And I tell you, my mom, Bernice, I think she went out and bought every copy in Deloge, Missouri. She was so proud. But just a sample of some of the stuff that came off, treasure-wise, gold doubloons, pieces of 8, beautiful work chains and gold bars, and just a whole conglomeration. That's probably $1 million worth of stuff. I don't know, especially if you throw in the chains, these money chains. Each link, they would snap off. They wore these chains, and you could buy a slave with it. You could get goods and services, whatever you needed. That was your money chain for the wealthy. And I figure a lot of those wealthy people went to the bottom still wearing those gold chains because you can imagine how much they weighed. First treasure ever found on the Verge of Lona. I got pieces of 8 here in my hands here. And when you find those on the bottom, they look like Oreo cookies because of the silver sulfide that's clinging to them. Call it silver rust. And that's on the Verge of Lona. That's one of the other salvage boats off in the distance there. And I'm sure the captain was underwater doing something because we're up there clowning with treasure, you know, getting our pictures taken and all that instead of, you know, doing other duties that we're supposed to be doing. Let's see here. So after my Atocha years, I realized that if you're going to seriously look for treasure in the future, you got to have a degree in archaeology. So I come back to Cape and I enrolled at Southeast Missouri State University and started taking archaeology courses. And that went well, but then an opportunity came up to be the city's aquatic director. I was still working at the bubble, I was teaching private lessons and all that, became the aquatic director, and then eventually started teaching at the alternative school, a new school here in town, which once again was created by this man right here, Professor Rhodes. You can see why I try to keep this guy around. Right here. And taught 15 years there and eventually retired from the Cape public school system. Okay. Then some time went on, and the phone rang again one day. This was six years ago. I'm down at my shop in our home over on Landgraf, and it was Russell Grammer, the director of Prodigy Leadership Academy, and he's like, Randy, we have found a shipwreck on the Mississippi River. Would you be interested in investigating that? So once again, I'm like, let me think about it. Yeah, I'll do that. And 6 years later, we're still investigating this wreck. If we're lucky, you can see it maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks out of the year, because right now she's probably 20 feet underwater. And no, it's not a diving wreck, it's a land dig. And whenever the river drops low enough to the level of about 7 or 8 feet, then we scurry down there and we see what we can do. Now, can we go down there and just start taking things off of it? No. But the Department of Natural Resources has given me a lot of latitude in investigating this wreck. I asked permission. Yeah, you can do that, you know, just whatever you do, you know, you have to put it back. So anything we investigate, if we take it off the wreck, we clean it, we photograph it, and we do the measurements, and we try to figure out what the heck it is and what it means, and then we put it back. But this was taken probably 4 years ago when I went down. It was just partially exposed by the drop in the river. And that's all detailed in my book about the Cape wreck. And I don't know if you'll back up just a little bit on that one, Randy, please. It's a fascinating wreck. I think it's a real sleeper. I think it sank intact because of items that are still on it that would have been salvaged, because, you know, back then you didn't go out to the hardware store, for example, and purchase a new cleat or the steering mechanism that we discovered, some batteries that are on it. You know, they didn't really you know, waste that kind of stuff. That was expensive, valuable stuff. So it's a mystery what's still locked in the mud-filled hull, and there's really no need to really excavate it yet. You know, when you do something like this, you want to get all your measurements and documentation and anything you can learn about the wreck before you tap it. And besides, one problem is I don't have either a qualified archaeologist who might have the desire to help as a volunteer, like we all are, with this worthy project. So, poor Dieter, I've already tapped him. I just met Dieter. I know he's an archaeologist, so looky here.
Where is this located?
Well, I have to present your riddle. Who asked that question? Oh. I have to present it as a riddle. I can't just tell you. So, the oldest boat in town is behind the newest boat in town. What is the newest boat in town? The casino. Smack. Everybody raise their right hand. You can't get a square. You won't reveal the location. It's smack dab behind our new casino. Yep, it sure is. That's where she lays. And we've named it the Amy Elizabeth after its discoverer, which is Amy Grammer, Amy Elizabeth Grammer. We put that name to it until we find out what the heck it is and what it was carrying and more of the history of it. So it's kind of it's cool. I think it's a real sleeper wreck. Like I said, it's kind of a morph between the days of wooden boats and the days of steel or iron boats. The hull is iron, but all the cross members and the supports and the decking and all that stuff, it's all wood. So it's an interesting, cool little wreck worthy of investigation. And I think it's going to turn out, at least in my way of thinking, it's already a part of our great river heritage here in Cape Girardeau, and everything we've discovered so far is in the book. Okay, the Tempest and the Talisman. There's also in the book I cover all the wrecks that I could find off of our shores here. There's a lot of historic wrecks ranging, from down south of the bridge all the way up past Devil's Island, and of course all the way up to Neely's Landing. I wanted to talk about the Talisman and the Tempest, the collision they suffered just south of the bridge here around the bend. Horrible accident. And I was just going to read from the book here because what kind of memory I have, you guys have figured that out already. So, of course, the book is in the form of messages to Samuel Clemens, which I'll try to make sense of that for you before we leave here today. 1/2 mile south of Cape Girardeau, the steamer Talisman sank after a collision with the steamer Tempest on November 19th of 1847. The Talisman sank in 10 minutes. 51 passengers and crew drowned in the frigid Mississippi. The crew of the Tempest came to aid, the crew of the Tempest boat, came to the aid of the drowning passengers of the Talisman as best they could. Local scoundrels arrived, and they chose to pluck as much floating luggage and cargo as possible out of the river instead of saving all these poor drowning people. I blame it on the Scotch-Cityans. That's his problem. Yeah. Avoiding and ignoring the pleas of drowning passengers, the engineer of the Talisman refused to leave his post. He was last seen when the muddy water swept him back into the engine room to his death. A diving bell, I thought this was cool, a diving bell was used during an attempted salvage and recovery of the victims. Only 5 bodies were recovered from the remains of Talisman. I have to wonder, Sam, if you knew of Talisman and her fate as you piloted the bend south of Cape Girardeau dozens of times during your time as a pilot on the river. Now that was the only wreck I was going to talk about today, but I noticed something this morning. Today's a big anniversary that has to do with our river heritage and wrecks, and I'm going to refer to the sinking of the Stonewall up at Neely's Landing. And let's see, I think I marked the place here. Okay, I might have to back up here. I need the theme from Jeopardy playing. Okay. Can someone sing? Jared, do you have your trumpet? Okay, here it is. On October 27th, 149 years ago today. Didn't see this coming, folks, but here it is. On October 27th, 1869, the passenger steamer Stonewall burned and sank upriver a few miles north of here at Neely's Landing. During a game of cards, a candle was knocked over, igniting a bale of hay. What should have been a minor incident turned out to be a very tragic one. Without a bucket of water available to extinguish the flame, the fire quickly spread to other bales of hay. Panicked passengers began to jump overboard in order to escape being roasted alive. In an attempt to give his mostly drowning passengers a chance to escape, the pilot grounded Stonewall, the boat Stonewall, on a sandbar. Unfortunately, it pivoted into the wind, causing the flames to wash across the decks of the boat from bow to stern. The people at Neely's Landing came to the aid of the stricken 250 passengers, unlike the Scott Cityans with the Tempest. Only 50 people survived. Many of the survivors of Stonewall were taken in by the citizenry of Neely's Landing. The children were raised and people were taken in. Around 60 unclaimed bodies were buried in a mass grave. Its location now lost to the fog of history, and maybe we can find that at some other time. Ken Steinhoff has done a lot of tramping around up there and has identified a few potential spots where the graves might be, but once again, it's kind of lost to the fog of time. So once again, a year after I got the call about the Amy Elizabeth, I'm standing down in my shop, minding my own business. I'm trying to figure this boat wreck out. And slide, please. Then the phone rings. Here we go again. I pick up the phone. Hi, Randy. This is Will Rogers. He's a buddy of mine. He's a treasure hunter. Of all names, he's a treasure hunter down in Florida. Yeah, Will, what's up? Well, I know Dr. Cindy Lovell real well, and she's the director of the Mark Twain Boyhood Home in Hannibal, and we were talking about doing a metal detecting survey at the Boyhood Home, and I can't come up and do it, and she's given full permission. Do you think you might want to do it? I'm like, let me think about it. Yeah, I can do that. Sure. So we made the arrangements and all that, and I started going up there, and the idea was just a metal detector around the Boyhood Home and the grounds and the Blankenship property behind that where Tom Blankenship lived, and we know him as Huck Finn, who lived right behind Sam there, and made several trips, and I was coming up with a few goodies, but at the same time I found something that gave me an idea, and that's, I guess, why we're all here today. I made this one discovery that got me to thinking about Mel Fisher, because I found 3 quarters on my first trip, and on these quarters, written in crimson red, and they were modern quarters, were the 3 letters D-A-Y. Well, Mel's battle cry for us every day, because he was an optimistic person, was today's the day. Today's the day we're going to find the treasure. And I'm like, that's kind of hair-raising a little bit. And I thought, well, with historical discoveries and throughout history, we find connections, with names and places and dates that all just kind of blend together and makes you think, well, this is all nice and coincidental. But, for example, who was the first man to land on the moon? Neil Armstrong. What a name for an astronaut that walked on the moon. That's kind of cool. Get this, though. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. Yet, let's give him credit for being part of the first team that landed on the moon. Do you know what his mama's maiden name was, Buzz Aldrin's? Her name was Marion Moon. That's pretty neat, And then you look at, I know you've probably read this before, and I started to copy it off and read some of it. You've read about the amazing connections between the assassination of JFK and Abraham Lincoln. There's a list of about 25 things. Some of them are pretty far-reaching, but 15, maybe 20 of those. Wowza! It's just amazing. So you get a chance to Google that, about the amazing connections between the Kennedy and Lincoln assassination. It's kind of spine-tingling. So I do this, for a couple seasons, and I'm coming up with modern stuff. I'm surprised I didn't at least find a 1900 quarter or something like that, but I'm finding scraps all throughout the yard, modern junk, and like everywhere else, my fair share of pull tabs and bottle tops and just iron junk. But this is a National Historic Site, and I'm basically a treasure hunter, and I'm wandering around a National Historic Site and metal detecting. Oh my God, you just don't get permissions like that, so I stayed at it. And then it kind of hit the fan. The more I started reading about Mel Fisher and Mark Twain and some connections in their lives, I was like, people have asked me over the years, Randy, why haven't you written a book about your experiences on the Atocha? And my stock answer always is, well, I know of about 12 or 15 books that's already been written by more qualified people who were there a lot longer than I was, And that's been done, but I do have a few stories I'd like to tell. So I started gathering all these amazing circumstances and parallels and serendipity and all this, connecting Mel and Mark Twain, and I started, finding some pretty cool stuff. I was like, well, I might have a book here. I can connect the Atocha site and the boyhood home. I can tell a few Atocha stories, and I can report on the boyhood home, what I'm finding there. And I thought, well, maybe I can find a connection between our riverboat and Mel Fisher or Mark Twain. Well, I'll be danged. I found those quarters on a Friday, and I was kind of frustrated because while I was in Hannibal, the river did dip low enough to where I could be also looking at the riverboat. They both happened at once. So I get back down here, and we trot out to the river and walk the sidewalk down, past the levee and all that. We get the boat, and I'm looking around, and I'll be dang, 2 days after I find those quarters, I managed to connect our sunken riverboat here with some serendipity, coincidence, with Mel Fisher. So now I've got this triad going with our riverboat, the boyhood home, and the Atocha. So then I started looking at the slide, please. And so I'm wondering, I wrote a kind of a technical swimming pool manual back in 2000. It was for backyard pools. That was my only experience at writing anything. I couldn't imagine I could write the book. And I don't know, I was driving to the pool one day, and I thought, well, how can I go about this? And I got this idea of why not do this in the form of messages to Mark Twain. Then when I thought of messages, I thought, well, why not seal each one in a bottle? And that's my form. That's my device for sending these messages to Mark Twain. And it was kind of a nice spin-off too, because I thought if I never complete the book, at least I'm going to have all these bottles floating around out there, and it's going to be amazing to see who responds. And some of the responses, oh my God, it's just like these people were meant to find these bottles, and 3 or 4 of the discoveries are in the book about where these ended up, and the people that found them, and their connections to Mark Twain, and or places where he visited and had impact upon, made some good fodder for the book, and kind of kept the theme going and all that. And so Deb took this, she did it with my iPhone in the glare of the sun, and I know she lined it up and all that, and she took the picture, but I just, besides my sagging pants, they're 5 pounds, right? Besides my sagging pants and my glasses about to fly off, but the way she captured that bottle, sailing like a missile, is pretty neat, I thought. So that's throwing one of the bottles down here at the Cape Riverfront. And I'd also throw bottles up in Hannibal while I was there. I'd launched a few up there. But that was my form of doing the book. Every time I'd finish a message or two, I'd bottle them up, and then I'd, of course, keep a copy. They're all in here. And I'd toss it in the river and wait for a response. So there's 60 bottles out there, and about 6 have been found. And out of the 6 that have been found, roughly 4 is just like, oh, this has got to go in the book. The other 2 are just like, no connection to Mark Twain. Nope, yada, yada, no, nothing at all. I'd searched that area and all that. Like, well, okay.
How did you find out that 6 were found? Did people contact you?
Yes, they did. I put a cover letter with each one. I sure did. And they had my phone number and email address and all that. So, and you have to wonder how many people might have found one and didn't report back. But that's a big old river out there. I've got bottles strung between here and the Gulf, I bet. And every time the river floods, I'm hoping maybe one will get kicked up out of a farmer's field or brush where it's hung up or whatever, and how many were smashed by towboats and all that. But that's been a fun part of the book, and kind of tied in with the theme that I was going for, connecting all these historical sites. 4 sites into one book. The other site being the 1715 fleet, where I've had minimal experience as a treasure diver. And slide, please. And that's back to the boyhood home, but. The 1715 fleet, a horrible marine accident that happened July 31st of 1715. 1,000 people died in 13 galleons that went off. It sank in a hurricane off the east coast of Florida. That's why it's called the Treasure Coast. That treasure's it's just strung everywhere. So even found a way to connect those great galleons, those lost galleons, with Samuel Clemens. So boom, now I've got my 4 favorite historical sites all wrapped into one book. Because who has the time or the gumption to write 4 books anyway, right? If it wasn't for Deb cracking the whip on me and my publisher, Sam Milner, I'm not sure it would have been finished, but eventually it was. And so this is at the dig at the boyhood home. This was a year ago. This was October of 17, and not the most clear image, but I'm finding so much broken pottery and fittings and pieces of coal all in this one particular area right behind the boyhood home that I stumbled across chasing a piece of scrap iron. When I finally got to it, and it was dramatic too, I finally got to it. I was about to leave. I was coming to your house for a barbecue. Hadn't found anything the day before. I was somewhat frustrated, still just doing the metal detecting gig. I chased the piece of scrap metal in the final hours of my visit there, and I finally got to it, and I wasn't real happy because I thought I'd wasted my last 2 hours in Hannibal chasing a piece of scrap iron. I pulled it out, and I was like, well, I won't say what I said. And I said, well, dang, you know. And I looked back in the hole, and where I had pulled that piece of scrap metal out, all this pottery and pieces of coal and bones and other material had fallen out of the wall. And so for the past 3 seasons, I've focused on this area, and I'm not sure what we have yet, but I have hundreds of pieces of broken pottery and fasteners and coal and bones. And there's an example there. It's just like, it's the Walmart of excavations. You don't know what's going to come across the screen yet, either. Just amazing. Bones. Buttons. Here's a comb with a few teeth left on it. I've got about 5 or 6 nice intact medicine bottles. This is another piece of bone here. I'm hoping they're pigs and cows. and a lot of chicken bones and iron fasteners. And I'm not sure what that is right there. Kind of cut it off, but it's just amazing. I got back from Hannibal a couple of weeks ago for this year's dig, and I just brought back more stuff. Okay, next slide, please. And there's an example of some of the broken pottery shards there, and it's always nice to find the little bits that have some nice glazed, artwork on them, and identifying marks, of the manufacturer. Those are very rare. Maybe 2% of the hundreds of pieces I have some kind of identifying mark. But that's spread out on the table, and I had rinsed those. The artifacts I find, if I see an identifying mark under the crud, I might clean that little area, but I'm leaving the cleaning to